Welcome to the Buy List. This is episode 46.
This is not financial advice. This is an interview with Karol. I have no idea how to pronounce your last name. Can you just tell us real quick so we don't butcher it?
It's Ruszkiewicz. It's a proudly Polish last name, but it's a bit of a mouthful. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Don't even bother attempting it. That's fine.
Perfect. I'm gonna skip right over it. Thank you so much for joining us. This is truly an honor and a pleasure. For those who do not know, Karol is probably the OG podcaster of Flesh and Blood and a developer at LSS. Used to do Session Blood with Kieran, Mr. Classic. Does he still go by Mr. Classic?
Oh, absolutely. Even more so than ever before. Yeah. But yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys. I'm a big fan of the podcast and your show in general, so it's an honor to be here.
Thank you. I think the honor is definitely all ours. Is there anything that I missed that you want to tell the audience about yourself before we kind of like dive into just throwing questions at you?
No, I'm a game developer at LSS. Previously, I did have a podcast with Kieran called Session Blood. I mean, it's still technically, we might release an episode here and there. We've always talking about it. So, other than that, I write articles for Channel Fireball. So you can, if you're after some strategy tips, budget deck lists for new heroes, stuff like that, you can definitely check that out as well. But yeah, that's about it.
Me and Ted always joke that every time you drop an article on Channel Fireball, that it's like 2 days before we're set to like record or like do like a deck tech on like Max or something, and it's like you just drop like a Max article, and it's just like, it's because you're a day ahead of us, really. You're just like, honestly, it's cheating.
Hey,
like,
I follow the show. I can, it's like you guys do your predictions for card prices and stuff. I'm just like, what are these two gonna drop next?
Yeah, we just need to be a little quicker on the trigger, I think. So, we've got like a kind of some quick hitting questions just to kind of get a little to know you and a little bit of your background and like what you like about Flesh and Blood. So, like, what is your favorite region in Flesh and Blood of all of like the lands that we have?
I think it's probably those Konami. It's no surprise that it's Savage Lands. I think there's just this kind of it's the classic kind of nature fantasy theme, but it has that kind of murky, kind of dark, mysterious vibe about it that I'm like a big fan of. And honestly, it's just ever since having read some of the lore about it from the first lore book, I was just kind of like, this is my kind of vibe. So yeah, plus Rhinar, my OG main, so it comes from Savage Lands, so there's definitely an affinity for that place.
Are you still a Rhinar main, or like have you picked up other heroes and like that's your go-to now?
I feel like I'm kind of everything main now, but Rhinar's always like kind of close to my heart. I feel like there's definitely heroes that like I would say like Dramai, Lexi, and Vincent, maybe a bit of Katsu here and there. Are kind of like the heroes that I'm quite into. But yeah, other than like the play style, I think just the thematically, Rhinar's always been kind of. I feel like it's just how Flesh and Blood works, right? Like one of the first heroes you're drawn into, it just takes a special place for you. So Rhinar's definitely that hero for me.
Yeah.
Yep.
What is your favorite set of all time?
So I'm someone who I love Crucible of War. Possibly because it was the last set before I joined. That came out before I started working closely with LSS. So I still kind of saw it as the player, and as in those times, just having a set drop that really kind of opens up the arsenal for each class, each hero that was out at the time, was definitely something special. And also just the way that Blitz was introduced back then. There was a bunch of new heroes, bunch of new weapons, equipment, kind of alternate archetypes. So, and plus it was a lot of fun to open.
Yes,
Yeah,
great,
I
great set
agree.
to open.
Mm-hmm.
I Ted got he's opened a ton of Crucible lately,
Yeah.
and it's
Mm.
man, there's just something different about that set. I don't know what it is. I love everything about it.
Yeah.
Everything just feels special. The artwork is so good.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was a
exactly.
set that yeah, it was interesting. It was a set that, like you said, it like upgraded everything.
Yep.
Like you look at the cards in there and you're like like you can look at like pitch cycles, like Maverin Skies and all these weapons, and it was just like a shift upgrade for like most of like all the heroes, which is like super cool, right? And it's like I don't think you can really do that very often. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's like infancy of the game, so yeah, it's definitely one of my favorites as well.
Yeah, yeah, and it was just such a huge injection. I think like proportionally wise compared to what was already there, and I think that's a big difference of I think how sets are coming out now, where like there was like a third of your heroes cards are like or your classes cards are kind of like entering. You're just like whoa, what a big hit.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's and also just the kind of I really enjoyed the equipment and the weapons that it provided. I think those kind of just the fact that like a lot of them open up completely different avenues for heroes to explore, like with Cards of Bladehold, and then um, Dorinthia had access to that instead of Tunic, and then it kind of like changed the builds a little bit there. The introduction of Mandible Claws for my boy as well. That combined with,
Mhm.
with Blood Rush was just like a game changer as well. Back in my day, we had to work for our Blood Rush bellows. We had to come up with
Yeah.
action points,
Mhm.
try and find ways to utilize it on multiple attacks, and claws are just like, you know what, you just have to play it.
Mhm.
Not only that, we
But
got
yeah,
Gambler's Gloves
I think
too.
there's a lot of aspects of it definitely that kind of bring back that kind of nostalgia for myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Same. In that kind of like in that that same breath of you said you really like to open Crucible. What is your favorite set to open? And because you are a true OG, you can't say Alpha because that makes everyone else sad.
Yeah. So fun little fact about me is like I don't. The weird thing is like I know like a lot of TCG players just love opening packs, and even being a fan of your show, I understand. Your target audience is people who love cracking packs, and I don't actually. For me, I always have this thing where I rather I love opening packs during a draft and sealed, and whenever I open packs that's not part of those, I just feel a little bit like a kind of like I could have been putting them to a better use, and I think that's why
Yep.
probably like cracking Crucible of War was nice for me because I'm like, hey, I can't even use these for limited anyway, so it kind of felt unique in that
Mm.
aspect as well.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now that you're no longer well, I guess you do you still go to Armories or no?
I haven't been to an armory in a long time, sadly. I always try and find time, but now with two kids and when your work is playing Fab most of the day,
Yeah.
um,
Yep.
I just don't have the same drive I used to beforehand.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Mm.
Yeah, I can understand that. My dad, my dad's an auto mechanic, right? And
Mm.
then so we try to build cars and stuff, and he says the same thing. So hearing you say it, it's like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. He's like, I don't want to come home and wrench on cars too, man.
Exactly, exactly.
You know what I mean?
And
So yeah, I can see how that goes.
yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's like I still love Fab, and the great thing is my kind of um, what how would you call it? The battery for kind of is kind of fulfilled basically every day at
Hmm.
work. So um,
Yep.
there will definitely be events that I want to attend to that probably I do want to get to an armory at some point. Um, but there will be some events that I'm definitely keen to play coming up soon. So you might see me tweeting on some kind of with playing in the flesh and blood,
Ooh,
close around here.
interesting. All right. I see the nugs being dropped here. Are you coming to LA or no?
Not sure yet. Not sure.
Not sure yet. All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I also live the 2 kid life, so I understand the difficulty of just basically doing anything outside of work. So
Yeah.
it's like, try to get any time off to go do anything. Ted was giving me grief for not going to Calling Hartford, and I'm like, man, I only got so much wife capital I can use, man.
Exactly.
I gotta
You got to manage that wife capital wisely. Definitely.
Yes. Yep. I can't just be going and blowing that on a Calling. I got to go get the pro tours. So
Exactly. You got to aim high with your free time, right?
Yep. So obviously, as an OG and an LSS employee, you probably have some very cool pieces of a collection. I'm assuming. Like, what is your favorite of like all the things that you've either pre-LSS or like now that you're an LSS employee? I know they gave out those sweet like that big mat to employees like a couple years ago with like the art of all the employees on it. So like, what's your favorite piece of your collection?
So yeah, me and Kieran are at the front of that mat on the latest one. So if any one of you has that playmat, you can spot us at the very front. But my kind of most treasured piece, and might be like, I'll try and be brief, but there is a bit of a story behind this, is gold foil scabbies that basically back in 2020, before the first nationals, was it the first? Yeah, the first national, New Zealand nationals, the road to national events, the first prize was a gold foil legendary. Now it might seem like crazy, but you had like 25 people turning up to these things, and I managed to win one. I opened a tectonic plating, and everyone was kind of gearing up for nationals. It was the first one ever, and fate had it that my first baby was due on the very same date that the nationals event was happening, so I couldn't make it. But Kieran decided to play Reiner for that event, and he ended up going, and he kind of used most of my deck list. I kind of like guided him through the deck, and even in the hospital when after my daughter was born, he was calling me up being like, hey man, it's round 6, I'm versing this, like what's my sideboard strategy and all this. And so it was quite a funny time. But he managed to top 8. Not only that, I'm pretty sure he top 4 that event. And back then in top 8 of nationals, you got to draft the gold foils. So the top seeded person got to pick first, and then it went all the way down to 8th. And because there were only 8 gold foils at the time that were kind of the class gold foils, he drafted scabbies for me, and he was like, when he came back from Wellington back to Auckland where we live, he was like, you know what, this is for you. And we traded the tectonic plated for the scabbies, and he was like, I know how much you would want to have scabbies, and we did that trade. Until this day, it's probably my kind of most treasured possession. And
that's
plus,
awesome.
I'm kind of working on my full gold foil Reiner set, so in terms of the equipment, so that's definitely helped.
Need a club?
Oh, I might do actually.
Got 2 of them. Yeah.
Nice, those are sweet.
Yeah, I opened back-to-back clubs in my gold foils, and I was just
Really?
like, I opened a third. I was opening a third one, and I was like, if this is another romping club, I'm just gonna go and buy all of the gold foil romping clubs. I'm gonna corner the market.
Yeah, be the only one in the world with the.
Yeah, yeah. Are we so like? I'm sure you can't say anything, but like, club is great. Can we make club great again? Is Heavy Hitters gonna make club great again?
You'll have to find out. Unfortunately, hey, it's just a couple of months. What is it?
I know.
1 month,
Yeah.
2 months? Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
We got a
soon.
month
Very
now.
soon, you'll find that out.
I know. I love spoiler season. I'm so excited to see what everybody puts together. And I think like each release, LSS has like upped their game too, and just like making it feel like an event. They're just like walking through it, this like story arc. It's really cool. So
Yeah, I think it's like mad props to the marketing department because, you know, especially last year and the last 2 years, we've been growing a lot, and you can just see that in the different departments throughout the company. And marketing is one that you can pick up on from release to release. And also, massive props to Alex, who is kind of the driving force behind a lot of the videos, that kind of content that's been put out. So yeah, I can't wait to see what they get up to in 2024. To be honest.
yeah,
Same.
yeah. I think they're absolutely crushing it there.
Mm-hmm.
So last Karol question, then we can move into heavy hitters. What is your favorite limited set? And you don't have to say the set name, but bonus points if it hasn't been released yet. So like if it's like set like what
Set
are we on
X.
now? This is set what, 13?
Yeah,
12?
12? Is this 12?
Bright lights, and then this one.
So if it's
13?
like set like 15, you can just call it set 15. That's fine. But what's your favorite limited set to play?
I think I think the Sansa is going to speak to that point that, you know, each department's getting like improving at the headquarters, and I feel like as the dev team, especially in the last year or year and a half, I feel like we've really gotten better, and the all three sets, I feel like it's kind of like set by set. For me, this is speaking personally. I've definitely seen an improvement in the kind of limited gameplay. And to answer your question, yes, the set that is my favorite limited set has not been released yet. I
Ooh,
won't say
yeah.
which one it is.
All right. All right.
It's definitely getting released in 2024. But yeah, that's probably my favorite set of all time. I won't say which one it is, but it's pretty
Wow.
epic.
That's
You
all
got to
right.
come back on when it
When
Yeah.
it drops. Yeah.
releases.
Yeah.
All right.
We can
Carol
talk
gets
about
one
it.
bonus point.
Yeah,
When
bonus
it's
points.
See how many-
out, I'll message you guys and be like, "That's the one."
That's the
All right,
one.
perfect.
That's the one.
I'll be waiting for it.
I think like speaking to the limited, like bright lights, I've seen it personally, like drafting all these sets. And like bright lights, I think everyone kind of like took it like for granted when it first released, but like that limited format is so deep.
Mm-hmm.
And like I know even like our team's card evaluations changed like week after week, and like in you saw at Worlds that like all of these different people got to the top 8, and it was all through different like drafting different heroes. It wasn't just like everyone. A lot of people online were like Tech Lovasin for life, and it's like no, like
Yeah.
when the seats open, you take it. But like every hero had their like niche, and if you executed, you were always rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was pretty happy with how Bright Lights turned out. It did took a lot of time, I think, for people to find that depth, but I feel like the player base got there eventually. But yeah, it was kind of interesting to see it like that kind of, you know, take if I'm gonna force Tick Clavos no matter what, you know, I'm gonna fatigue everyone, and that strategy works to an extent, but then like as people level up, you can kind of see people figuring out that hey, maybe there's, you know, that is not like be all end all of a strategy.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's something about Bright Lights is the fact that it was quite. There was a lot of new things going on. There was a lot of moving parts, and you know, you have the evos, the items. There's a lot of like little synergies in there as well. So honestly, it was quite a complex set for from a strategy perspective. I think the fact that it was just one class, I think it helped a lot to kind of get started and get a taste for it. But then as you play it along, you kind of be like, "Ooh, whoa, okay." There's all these little like big synergies, micro synergies, and like things like that. So, I was really happy watching Worlds and seeing what people kind of figure it out in the limited portion of Worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one thing that I'll give you guys props on with Bright Lights especially is that I don't I didn't really draft it competitively, you know, on the other side of Nate's coin there. So like I just went to locals, and like I think one of the great things about Bright Lights is that every time I went to my local armory and drafted it, I got super rewarded, even if I was like 1-2 or 0-3, because it was like, oh, I learned a little bit extra. And then like each week I could like visibly see myself getting better and like understanding that depth. So you don't need like a PhD. Like you can get there like not quickly, but you can level up, you know, at a good pace, right? Just for like a casual player, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like if you only have time for one draft a week, because there's like that kind of depth there, you can enjoy the same format for, you know, 3, 4, 5 weeks in a row of just kind of be like, oh, I'll try this. So I'm happy with where it ended up.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, you want to move?
Okay,
into heavy
so
hitters?
I think we're gonna move into some heavy hitter questions now.
All right.
I'll lead it off here. So, what is your favorite heavy hitter hero? Obviously, we haven't seen them all yet, but you know, out of the ones we've seen,
I'll just put that disclaimer out there, but I think it might not be a surprise, but KO is just, to me, it's just a breath of fresh air for the brute class. And honestly, I think just the way he just kind of creates his own lane within the brute class, I think it's just massive. As a you know, fan of brute myself, I've been really enjoying KO, and that's got to be it. In terms of like cards, I think my favorite thing about heavy hitters in terms of the spoiled cards is, in general, is the agility token, and the way the agility token kind of opens up the game without it opens up your play patterns without much, like it has that kind of, it fades away, unlike a quicken token, which you can just kind of not do anything and wait with it. Agility, it's there and then it's not. So I feel like that kind of, because it's not that permanent, I feel like it creates really interesting dynamic in the format, and especially for brutes, for the brute class as well. You know, I think it's a lot of brute fans who have been kind of cursed by the scabby rolls and kind of like heavily relying on that, kind of have a different avenue to be like, you know what, you want an action point? Get an agility token instead of rolling those scabs. And I think that's my favorite kind of card from what's revealed so far, is that Smashback Alehorn. I think that card is an amazing blue that you can just chuck into your brute deck and kind of set up in the similar function that previously you had the time snap potions or those kinds of tools there. So that's probably, it's not the flashiest of cards, but it does the job.
That card, one, art slaps. So like great art, great name, and the card's awesome. I love that card.
Absolutely. I like all the kind of the goblets and alehorns, the whole cycle from all the classes. They're really cool.
Yeah. Set that up, play that, set your Savage Feast and Arsenal. Baby, we cooking.
Exactly.
Yep. So I did want to ask, like one of the things that Brute specifically, and like we've seen this a little bit with Warrior as well, struggle with throughout like their life cycle in Fab, is that they're mid-range decks, but like mid-range is like we've seen metas be very either like aggro tilted or like control tilted. And these decks have kind of lacked to force interaction.
Mm-hmm.
With wager being introduced, do you like, how did that come about? And is that kind of like was that kind of brought into like force interaction into these mid-range decks to like make people respect it? And well, mostly the aggro decks, but
I think the wager mechanic, and this is me talking personally here, is I think it fulfills that role of creating interaction, definitely, as something that, you know, Fab just is kind of known for, the back and forth. And I think it definitely sells that purpose. I guess it does give the brute class that kind of access to on hits as well. But I think the main thing about the wager mechanic is there's levels to it, because each token fulfills a different role, and because it goes because the wager works for you and your opponent if they block it out, it creates that really interesting dilemma within games from turn by turn play, being like, hey, if I wager this agility and my opponent blocks out and they get that agility, what are they gonna do with it? You know, similar thing to the vigor and the might tokens. So I think that its main role is creating that interaction, but also just thematically, it's just such a great fit. You know, on the sidelines of this Coliseum, you have all these kind of heroes like arm wrestling and kind of trying to one up each other and stuff like that. So I think it just kind of fits very well in the product. I think, and especially in Heavy Hitters limited play, I feel like I think that's quite a big difference from Bright Lights, where the on hits weren't as prevalent, and this one you just really kind of you feel this back and forth, and you have this a lot of this dilemma, being like, do I have to block this out? Can I use this if I block out? Do I even want to wager? Like, is my opponent going to use this? So just that alone creates a lot of kind of decision points and skill expression for the players as well.
Yeah, and a tournament in limited, I can imagine that is a lot of tension added to the game, right? Especially like you said, you can choose not to wager, as you know, because they might be able to use it against you if they block out, right? Does that, especially, you know, when your life totals are getting low, it's like, I can't afford to give them this vigor token, that extra $1. Now they can swing their weapon, or you know, we know there's one cost attacks or whatnot. So
yeah, especially when the life totals are low, you know, and you're just like, ooh, can I afford to do this? Yeah, it's really cool. It's a really cool mechanic, and I hope people enjoy it. And especially, I can't wait to see it on like ultra high competitive play, where you just like,
oh yeah,
I wonder how many people are going to like bluff the wager, you know, just like, I just really need them to block out this attack. Like,
yeah. I just need
cards.
Just
like, I don't even need this token, please. But if they block it out, then like, sweet.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As that's like peak Fab, right? Like,
absolutely.
I think we can all agree here that whole like bluffing and, you know, if you're an OG, right, you played against Dory, and it's just like, I hope this is enough. Just like, you just block and you're like, please don't hit me with everything, you know? And so this adds another layer to that, which I'm excited for. I think it's going to be really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. No lunging press, please. Please, no lunging press.
Yeah. Yeah. So moving on to, I guess, you know, getting into the heroes, right? You mentioned KO is your favorite, but I did have a question about Betsy in a way, right? So we've been seeing in, I guess, Fab 2.0, I'll call it, the increase of Overpower being printed on cards. Is that a design choice to move towards maybe a more interaction than Dominate, right? Dominate's pretty, you know, is quite a bit more strict than Overpower. And, you know, we've seen, you know, Overpower in Bright Lights now, and then now we saw it with Betsy.
Yeah, I think this is again me talking personally. I'm not talking
Yeah.
on behalf of the rest of the team, but for me, I think what it does is it dominate is still, you know, a core mechanic of the game, but what dominate
Hmm.
created in the past is these situations where the only real way to play around it is to sit on a defense reaction, or hold up armor. And I think Overpower is that kind of middle ground where you are still getting that evasion that you're after, but you're creating situations where it's not so cut and dry, so black or white of you better have a defense reaction or this is hitting. It's kind of like you you kind of still kind of giving your opponent a lot more agency over the defending of the attack in different ways. And what it also does is, and I think in Bright Lights, it was really kind of shown how, because of like the evos, the way they worked with the defense
Hmm.
being like, oh,
Yeah.
this overpowers even, more powerful than a dominated attack because I can't even use my
Hmm.
equipment to block. So I think what so far with Bright Lights and now Heavy Hitters, I think we're going to showcase different sides of Overpower as well, of how it can be implemented. And I think Heavy Hitters does it in a completely different way to Bright Lights, but it's just that kind of evasion that doesn't force your opponent to just sit on a defense reaction, which I think is just kind of opens the game up a bit from
Hmm.
kind of being forced into very defensive plays by your opponent. Um, but yeah, I would say that that's how I personally see it. Um,
Hmm.
and it's still just, and it's really cool how the mechanic works against different heroes. If you're versing a warrior, you might want to rely on some other forms of evasion because they have a lot of attack reactions. And then you're versing, I don't know, a ninja or something, and you're just like, this is just as good as dominate anyway. So I
Hmm.
think that's the main thing, is like giving it's an evasion without being so drastic, basically.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. Yep.
So I did want to ask too, like, so talk about KO, how you like KO. I'm loving KO. I think that his design is so open in, like, you can take it in so many different directions. You can go like berserk combo. You can go like more mid range and run like E strikes and like sensor and like a bunch of fives because you have that flexibility with the hero. Um, but then on the other end of that spectrum, we have Betsy. We haven't seen all of her cards yet, but she looks very tied to the wager mechanic.
Hmm.
So, like, is this like you have one end of the spectrum where KO is like very open, like he's like a free range chicken, and
Hmm.
then
Yeah.
like he can go do whatever he wants because he's got the world is his oyster. And then we got
Hmm.
Betsy, who's like very tied to the wager mechanic.
Hmm.
Is that part of like how you want sets the kind of like rollout where like one hero is very siloed, and then we have some more like free range chickens off to the side that you can kind of experiment and play with and
Hmm.
tinker?
I think this stems down to Heavy Hitters is set to be an amazing product to introduce new players to, and we're very conscious to give players explicit kind of direction when, especially in something like limited or whether sealed or draft, when you're reading these heroes, some of them are a lot more explicitly kind of tell you what to do, and others are a bit more open. And I think having these that kind of explicit and implicitly pointing heroes is really important to as an onboarding product, because you can show Betsy to a new hero and be like, hey, you draft some wager cards, you
Yep.
pick some of those up, and it's going to interact with your
Yeah.
hero, and it just kind of streamlines that strategic depth in a way to
Mhm.
someone who's just picking the game up for the first time. And I think that's in that way, I feel like Heavy Hitters is quite similar to Welcome to Wraith, where we're really kind of focused on stripping it down to basics, making things as simple as possible, but at the same time still having that strategic depth for more engaged players. And I think that was, I think it's a very conscious thing, especially when you have so many heroes in a product, where it's just makes it a bit more streamlined, I think.
Awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
you
that's
kind
a
of see it
great
a little. We haven't seen anything from like Olympia, or not a whole lot from Kasai, but Kasai looks also like very open, where Olympia very tied to gold. So that makes a lot of sense. I'm hyped. This set does look like it's like WTR and Crucible had a baby, and I'm all about it.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah. One other question on like Betsy's hero design. Her hero ability reads very much like Bravo. Did she initially start off with like a different ability, and then it was moved closer to like something that was more comfortable? Was she a little bit more pushed, or is this kind of like always what she looked like?
I mean, she was the the direction for the hero has been quite similar. I'd say. I don't think it's made too much difference. Um, you know, we basically knew what she was going to do. I think the similarity to Bravo might seem, it reads very similar. I think it's one of these things where um, you read the cards and you're like, okay, bit of evasion, 2 cost to attack, but there's quite a lot of difference in terms of how it actually plays and how the heroes, what the 2 heroes want to do. So I think it's not it's not a coincidence that they look quite similar, but I think it's like once you delve into it and play the 2 heroes, you'll find that the way they're built and played will probably have a bit more of a difference between them.
Great.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm excited now. I'm excited to see. I'm excited for spoiler season.
Yeah,
For sure. Like can't wait to see what she's got cooking. Nate, you had mentioned it, or you mentioned Olympia. That's the other new hero that we've seen. Now that hero, like the hero text himself, and I mentioned this in a prior episode, but so that hero text seems doesn't really jump off the page, right? Like, and I know you can't say anything, but maybe you can nod or wink or something. Are we gonna get like are Warrior fans gonna get super pumped when they see his armor or his weapon? Because I have a feeling they are.
I mean, we'll see. What I think it's the whole Olympia's hero ability. I think goes back to kind of what I mentioned about kind of giving you players that kind of like direction of what they want to do. And I understand if you're an ingrained Flesh and Blood fan and you read this hero ability and you're like, oh, I get a gold from winning a wager, but and Kasai I get a gold from something else. But it's again one of these things that it might on the surface look quite bland or like similar, but there's a lot of depth to how these heroes play out, and I think that's something that's going to be a lot more obvious once you kind of start building the heroes and playing them and see the rest of the Heavy Hitters kit. And it's once you kind of hit those like gold numbers, like the hero is just pretty crazy at generating gold in certain times, and you can do some crazy things with an abundance of gold. So I'll leave it there.
Leave it there. Okay, yeah, that's enough. We'll wait and see. It's like you said, it's about a month away, but that's definitely whets my appetite. I kind of had a feeling that was the case because it's like you said, it looks very similar, but still very exciting to see what you guys got cooking up with him.
Yeah, we're basically, I mean, we haven't seen a spoiler in like 5 days, and we're like rabid children at this point. Like,
Yeah.
we need some more. Where's the sixth hero at? Like, are you gonna spoil it for us live? Is that what we're
Yes,
doing?
it's happening right now. No, I'm kidding. I wish.
Yeah.
So we have some questions about like development as well,
Yeah.
and like how these things come about. What Outsiders and Bright Lights both had like fatigue elements that obviously frustrated some players, mostly on the sealed side, but then also in draft. Is there any like specific learnings that you've taken away from like those sets or previous sets that you think will help like development going forward to make sure that fatigue isn't as prevalent? I mean, obviously with Reinar in this set, like, you know, your boy ain't gonna let you block with anything anyway, so we're not going to fatigue.
Exactly.
But
Don't
like
like playing games fatigue? Play Rhina.
exactly.
No, it's. I understand. I think it's just the defensive strategy and a lot of kind of previous limited sets has been this kind of like easy way out, you know. And I think it's when you look at how Fab functions, it's definitely the onus is on the attacking hero to kind of like push through because things cost action points, resource points. You have to kind of figure out how to do it. Whereas when you're on the defense, you just slam down your cards and point at the defense value and be like, you know what, this is all I have to do. And that's especially true of something like defense reactions that you can slam into your arsenal and just sit on it and wait. So I think over time, I think we've been very conscious of that, and it's something that we've been kind of learning and adapting from set to set. And I think you can, in heavy hitters, I think as you will see the kind of like follow up step from these learnings. Um, I I understand. You know, especially in something like Seal, that is kind of the trajectory. But I do think that it's important to note that defensive strategies, when executed correctly, can be like a lot of fun and a lot of if there's enough of a skill
Yeah.
element to them. There's actually it's actually a very viable kind of strategy that can be engaging for both players. So you know, I'm not going to say like no game's ever going to go to fatigue, and you know,
Yep.
you better stop blocking kind of thing, because the back and forth is always at the core of the gameplay. Um,
Yep.
so I think what I'm trying to say is that you can expect defensive strategies to exist in maybe a kind of more skill testing ways. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
just say that.
I yeah, I totally get it. You're looking at a if you let me have Oldhim in a Tales of Aria draft,
Yeah,
I will windmill all those earth cards in 3 blocks,
yeah,
and I will have fun blocking you out, Briars.
yeah. Exactly.
I definitely see where you're coming from. There is some fun on the defensive side too, right?
Yeah.
And it can be very taxing at times, right?
Yeah.
Especially against a skilled, you know, in this example, a skilled Briar with Arcane, right? You always have to keep on your toes. So even, you know, like Teklovos in the last set, you know, a more recent example, right? I've drafted him a couple times, and it is very, you know, pitching your block cards when you need them, right? Or, you know what I mean? And so they come back at the same time, or when you need them more, rather. So, yep.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of kind of giving the same kind of skill test to the aggressor to the aggressive player as the defensive player, and I think it's you can see that with kind of the defensive tools that kind of have been throughout time, throughout the limited draft formats, where you start with something like Sink Below and Welcome to Wraith, and then like the defensive tools start kind of costing more and being more kind of harder to use to kind of combat that. And I think I hope so. I hope that players do feel that in the heavy hitters set.
for sure. Yeah, so more development questions here. Something that I've always thought about. Do you do certain cards start as lore and then they're asked you on the development team on the development team are asked, hey, we have this card, it's a significant lore piece, let's fit it in, right? Or does it go the other way, right, where it's, hey, we developed this card, it does X, and then the other side of the team says, oh, this would be perfect, let's put art here, let's call it this.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of having a reasonably small team, is the fact that we're quite nimble when it comes to these things, and I think it's the coolest thing about the process from start to finish is that there is that influence from story on the cards and cards on the story, and unfortunately, can't give you any specific examples, but it's really cool to see the progress, kind of like the process, and then the end result, and being like, hey, this was inspired by this lore outcome was inspired by the card, and vice versa. So that is definitely a part of it, and I think that is due to the fact that we kind of still at the core have that kind of nimble structure in place.
Yeah, and you can tell from the player side and from the fan side too.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you look close enough, you can tell, right? I'm kind of I'm not a heavy lore guy, but I pay attention, and you can kind of see some things, right? So it's always fun to like, hey, that's a cool Easter egg, right? And see those things. So,
Yeah,
for
definitely.
Like, when you're developing these cards and like working on them, obviously you go back and forth with the lore, but like what's the one thing that you were like the proudest of, like in terms of like development, of like your fingerprints are all over this card and that's kind of your baby?
There's actually so many. There's so many. I would say this is a tough one to answer, but I'm definitely proud of the work I did on um, the dragons. I'd say there's like a lot of influence on the dragons and Dromai. I think, and this is, you have to understand that, and as a dev team, we collaborate a lot, so it's really hard to pinpoint exactly who did what, who's kind of responsible for what. So this is kind of me talking like of me and the kind of being proud of the team in general of the work we did. I think balancing dragons with Dromai and crew, kind of finding that way for illusionists to work outside of what was previously kind of known to be the illusionist class, I think was I was really happy with that. Um, did quite a I did some work on with Outsiders was, I mean, sorry, Dynasty. I th- I was really I really loved the kind of concept of like tigers and what it offered for Katsu. So that was something I'm quite proud of, and in Dynasty, especially with the introduction of Assassin class, that was something that just like spiders bite. I can that was definitely a collaboration as well. But even just kind of getting that precise wording on that card, like getting that to the state that it was, because we go through so many different iterations of just trying to find that pinpoint, especially for something like a weapon. It's just really hard to get it precisely right in the right spot. So the outcome of Spider's Bite is something that I'm hugely proud of. Um, working on Vincent a lot in DTD, and kind of fleshing out a Shadow Rune Blade that is super unique, but also feels like a Shadow Rune Blade that doesn't step on Chain's toes, and kind of has that like unique identity, and you just feel like you're playing a different hero, And I think I'm really happy for with how Vincent turned out. Um, Yeah, I wish I could give you more specific examples, but I think it's
No, that's great.
but yeah,
uh,
there's a lot of
yeah.
stuff. Like honestly, like you have to realize that I'm a flesh and blood fan first and developer
Mhm.
second, you know, and it's
Yep.
like
Yeah.
coming from, you could say, playing competitively to, you know, falling in love with the game and then being able to influence it is awesome. And the development process in general is something I always like to compare it to like an iceberg. You know, once a set comes out, the player base sees the very tip of the workload that kind of went into it, whereas
Yeah.
underneath you have all the stuff, you know, that has been iterated on, scrapped, brought back, scrapped, iterated again. So yeah, it's it's definitely a tough thing to pinpoint specifically what my favorite things are, but the ones I mentioned are definitely up there.
Yeah, I think from the player side too, like you said, you're a fan as well. Nate and I are fans. I think like you mentioned, the dragons and spider bites are yeah, that is a pinnacle design feat for you guys, I think, right? Because the dragons do exactly what you just said. They aren't prism, but they still kind of give you that illusionist feel, which
Mm-hmm.
I thought was like a masterclass, right? And it's like you had to like really balance something that was, you know, slightly unfair with Spectra, right?
Yep.
And then like try to move away from that, but then do the same thing.
Yeah.
So like hats off to you guys for that. That is an impressive feat.
I think one of my favorite decks in my February right now is called Hello Kitty Remix, and it's like a hybrid like Kitty Cat Katsu, and that's, oh man, I love that deck. When are we gonna get more Hello Kitty support? That's the real question. I need some more kitty cats in my life. All right.
You better, yeah. You just gotta wait, Nate. You just gotta wait.
Oh,
No, but
all
like
right, all right, all right.
one of my favorite, I think tweets that I've seen last year was one of the Canadian players. I think it was Michael Jastrud. I don't know if he's got Polish origins or what, but his last name is Polish. But he was like, I just got killed turn zero by a Katsu. You know? It's like,
Yep.
imagine, you know, you're
Yep.
practicing for this tournament for like months, and then
Hmm.
I bet you he hasn't played against a Kitty Katsu once,
No.
Nope.
and then
No one
bam, you know,
has.
you're just like, wait, I have to block this card. Otherwise, what happens?
Yep.
You get like six crouching tigers. It's
Yep.
Mhm.
it actually made my day.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Speaking of kind of cards that maybe are out there lingering, James has mentioned, I believe it was at World San Jose. He was asked a question of, you know, what cards he regrets. I think it was something to do with regrets or he's scared of. I thought this was a good question to ask to you as well, right? Like, what cards in the card pool right now keep you up at night? And it's like when you develop something, it's like, okay, we have to smash these cards in this deck to see if we broke it or not.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because the ones that for me personally that I'm kind of that keep me up at night is more so the cards that are I'm like, is that powerful enough? You know, it's I think it's especially like the majestics and the like unique cards that do really cool unique things that might be super on theme, but I just sometimes worry as like, is this card, because different cards appeal to different players, right? You have people who just like the flavor of a card. They do some like big and silly things, or some, you know, for a competitive player, you'd be like, oh my goodness, you know, the value on this card is, it can be something like completely bland, but they're like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my goodness, this, I think Twin Drive is a great example of that. You like look at the card, you're like, boost, 2/5, like, but then like
Yeah.
you show it to a competitive player and they're just like, oh my goodness, the value this creates is insane, you know? Um,
Yeah.
so I think it's more so for me, it's cards that I think have like I just like really cool or like enable an archetype, but I just wonder like, is this powerful enough to see play? Because for me as a developer, the worst outcome is someone who's like a card that comes out that doesn't appeal to the flavor for players, doesn't appeal to the kind of do a big silly thing, doesn't appeal to the competitive player. So I think I'm just trying to focus and make sure that that it at least appeals to somebody, you know. And I think that's kind of for me is yeah, that's something that kind of creates some sleepless nights sometimes. I'm just like, wait, is this strong enough?
Yeah, that is not the answer I expected.
No.
But it's also a great answer because I think sometimes I lose focus on the flavorful side of cards because I tend to just lean towards being a spike and I want to win games, right? So it's like sometimes I'm like, is it strong enough? No, Looming Doom too hard to play, right? And I just like, but Looming Doom is like that's the one card that popped in my head while you were saying that. It's like it's very flavorful, and like if you pull it off, you're like you feel like a Rune Blade, you feel like you're bringing down the apocalypse on your opponent, right? So
yeah, and they're like, yeah, you're like, finally, I've got my 40 rune chant set up. I'll play Looming Doom.
And then we'll just have to play another 40 turns. So, in that same vein, like, are there cards then that like you feel like undershot, like where like you're like, you know what, we actually kind of like we went a little too low on this one. Like, do you like then look at like trying to boost that card up in future sets? Like I think of cards like Break Tide, like trying to reinvigorate the Flood Force, or is it Flood of Force? So is that something that you guys actively kind of look at? We're like, man, we really wanted this card to like make an impact and we maybe toned it down just a little bit too much.
Yeah, I think it's I can talk about like those because it wasn't working for LSS, but like I think Flood of Force is a great example that I like. For me, I wish it was just a little bit. There was a little bit more oomph to it. But yeah, I mean the thing is, it's at the end of the day, a lot of these cards, especially cards that do unique things, can be kind of shaped into different archetypes. And I think me personally, I would try to be very mindful of that, being like, how can we create something? Because at the end of the day, I feel like it's the majority of Flesh and Blood players are competitive players, and there's this tendency to follow the path of least resistance. You know, you can see it with Chiro's Briar, just like, I ain't fusing, I'm just going to play a bunch of 0/4s and whack you until your life total's 0. So I think that's why it's such a big challenge to create something that has enough of a hurdle, does something powerful enough, but finding that like the power balance and the hurdle balance for people to go like, you know what, I might try and make this card work. And I think it is important to be mindful of the older cards when making new cards to kind of create those synergies, whether it's done like kind of consciously or like specifically. It's hard for me to say, but I think as devs we're very mindful of all of the previous cards and how they interact with each other. Yeah.
With this.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna do a quick follow up to this. Just thought of it. With this being a living card game, right? This is like I would say one of the big benefits of Flesh and Blood. And Nate and I have talked about this, and it works on the market side, but it works on the game side as well, right? Is that you, as a living card game where Breaktide will never rotate out, right? It's same with Flood of Force. So is there a conscious effort on the development team to say, okay, well, maybe the next Ninja set we can add in one more combo line card for this combo line that's not been seen the light of day for years, right? And just like kind of tweak things and move things around. And I think you know, I'm just curious if that's like a forefront thought sometimes when designing cards.
Yeah, it's hard for me to speak to that in particular because that's a design kind of thing. But I would assume that I mean it's at the end of the day we're kind of mindful of all the kind of class cards and how they interact with each other. So I would say so. Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like sometimes it happens consciously, sometimes it happens by chance, and I think it's like I think the whole chaos situation was a great example of like, you know, as soon as the hero drops, everyone's like berserk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was cool. It was interesting to see kind of the player reaction with, you know, berserk kind of going from this like forgotten card somewhere to like all of a sudden like being like you know, the hottest thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good example of this working. And you know, it's hard for me to say. I'm not sure how much I can say whether it's like a conscious effort or non-conscious effort, but these things just are going to happen.
Yep.
I feel like it's one of these things that, you know, because especially in the majestic rarity, the cards do such unique things. I think you can a lot of the time expect, and I think for you guys it must be a thrill of, you know, trying to predict these things, right? Like trying to find like, hey, this card does this unique thing, and I feel like it's gonna. It might see a lot of play, and I think it's. I think some people. A lot of the time, I feel like these kinds of things are just kind of more simple than you might think. You know, I feel like the whole berserk thing. I think it's a good example of a card that always had some form, like a weird potential, but. You know, you kind of just like, oh yeah, we'll see what happens. There's a brute set coming out, so I mean that's why I enjoy watching you guys' show, is being like seeing what you guys come up with. You know, being like, oh, like you need to get a playset of these cards, or this card might be something that comes up. So yeah, it's definitely a fun thing to do.
Yeah,
You know,
offline, Nate and I pat ourselves on the back quite a bit. Or we try to. Every win, we're like, yeah, we did it.
You know, yeah. It was funny. I mean, we usually try to go like bargain bin hunting and like, all right, what's like try to get players like prepped for the next set. Like, what should we? I don't think we talked about Berserk once. And what's funny is I was checking my binder today. And I'm like, I only have 2 Berserks. This ain't good. I got to pay like $10 now. Shoot. I'm going to pick that up for like a quarter. So
yeah, I think that, I mean, a lot of, I've been watching the show for a long time, and I think you guys do a great job of kind of, you know, like having that competitive mind, and also just knowing how the cards, you know, the secondary market works. I think it's like really good information for players to be like, you know what, like I should pick up 3 copies of this card. Yeah. So I'm sure you guys pat yourselves on the back a lot offline.
Yep, just a couple, and then we like also kick ourselves for like not taking our own advice.
Yeah.
But we get a lot of things wrong too. So, but no, it's thank you. That's really kind words coming from you. So, I did want to ask you about like expansion slot. Like, where does it come from? Is this coming directly from design, or is design saying like, "Hey, here are the heroes that we want to hit in this"? There's gonna be like 8 questions here. So, I love the expansion slot. So like,
same.
I just want to know everything about it. Like, does this all come like from design? They're like, "Hey, here's like the set of cards that we want you guys to work on, like iron out," or is it like, hey, we want to hit these heroes. Here's kind of what we're thinking. Like, you guys like mess around with it a little bit, because it's not also like in the draft. So, like, where does that come from? And is there any concern with like, there's no more supplemental sets, and I'm the biggest fan of supplemental sets. Those are my favorite because everybody gets support, and I'm a degenerate and I play everything. So, is there concern that there's going to be like with only like 10 to 15 cards a set, that there's only going to be like vertical growth in the card pool instead of like horizontal growth, where like we might not ever see like another kitty cat Katsu. Like that might not exist because we don't have that much room to kind of like try to grow an archetype in the expansion slot.
Okay. I think kind of going back to the kind of role of the expansion slot, I feel like the answer is it depends. I feel like there's a lot of kind of factors for each different slot can kind of tackle a different thing, being like, do we need to there's many reasons for that. Like, is there like a kind of thematic implication for this particular class or this particular hero that we want to address? Is there a competitive thing that needs to be addressed? Is there kind of a gap? Do we need to support a particular archetype? And there's kind of basically there's a lot of different influences, and this is coming from me personally. That's how I particularly like see the slot working. So it's kind of like a tool that answers a lot of different things depending on what's needed at the time, I think. And as James said previously, it's just something that it's a new thing. How it gets implemented, like there's a lot of flexibility on how it can look in the future as well. So it's it's kind of like the beginning of the slot with bright lights, and I think it's we'll see where it goes from here, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm excited.
Question: when RuneGate 1 cycle and expansion slot?
What's that?
I said follow-up question: when are we going to get a RuneGate 1 cycle and an expansion slot?
RuneGate 1 cycle. Oh, you hit me off guard there.
That's not a real question. You don't have to answer
it.
Yeah, my lips are sealed. Can't say.
Ted is a Runeblade apologist, and every time I even say the word Vincent, he just like he's like, he's like, I just want chain.
No, I joking aside, I like Vincent. She does
she's
cool
very
stuff.
fun. Yeah,
she's cool. She's cool, but she's
not chain.
I'm waiting for those expansion slots.
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. I was playing some LL the other day, and I was playing chain, and I was just like, God, it feels good to be back, baby. Like just this is what true
Ted,
power.
you just need get your local LGS to play as much Living Legend as possible.
That's true.
Because trust me, it's a blast. It's a blast to play with these extra powerful things, and you're just like, dump your hand and do some crazy things.
Sure.
It's amazing.
Yep. So the next question we have for you here is about the Fabled cards, right? So it seems like they're, one of the hardest cards, like outside looking in, they seem like a very hard card to develop. Do you work, I think you might have already answered this, right? Do you probably work as a team on that? But I'm just curious, like how Fableds are handled, if you can maybe expand upon that a little bit.
I think we're very aware of how significant Fableds are. I don't think there's like a particular process of, these two people are just going to like make sure that test it to the ground kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I think it's basically it's a development card. It's a card that goes through the development process with extra attention, and that's as probably as much as I can say is like we're very mindful of the kind of significance of Fabled cards and finding the right power level balance.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I would say hats off to you guys, because I think the Fableds have been very consistent and very thematic, I guess I would say, right? They're it shows, when you look at the cards, right, what the purpose, like how they were developed, right? And I think that's probably not the easiest thing to do every time, but you guys are nailing it on the Fabled. So
thank you.
We always look at them and be like, Nah, not this time.
I have,
Did they do it? No, they didn't do it. Okay,
No.
we're good.
It just kind of takes me back when Uprising was getting revealed. I remember the sky was falling, being like, "This Fabled's insane," the
Yeah.
reduction of costs to draconic spells. And we were like, "Oh my goodness, this card pitches for 4. It's so broken." And yeah, good times.
Mm-hmm.
I was helping Hamilton test for the Dallas Calling, and he was like convinced that like with Tome of Imperial Flame, that like Blood of Drakai was actually like insane, because you actually didn't have to, because it got into your pitch zone first and then started reducing everything from there. But it didn't end up being good, and he didn't end up playing Dromai.
And you just like, I solved the format. I got Blood of Drakai, Tome of Imperial Flame, and then Crown of Dominion, and there's a CNC coming at you, and you're like, oh no.
Yep. I was like, Michael, are you sure? Am I supposed to go put out a want to buy post right now? Because they're pretty low. I was like, let me know, buddy.
Oh man, that's spicy tick right there.
Yeah.
So, 2 follow-up questions on the Fable. What's your favorite Fabled?
Probably Plague Hive.
Yeah.
I just love the art.
Yep.
I love the effect. I feel like the way the effect works is really, really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's in a very, like, for me, it's in a very good spot in terms of power level to kind of, I think it's exactly where a Fabled should be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I did the classic card game player thing when that was spoiled. And I read...
What's that?
I said I did the classic card game player thing when that was spoiled, and I read it once quickly and then ran to a Discord and was like, guys, you get to pick the token. Like, this Fabled is cracked. Like, what are we doing? Like, this is amazing. And then like reread. I'm like, oh, never mind. We're good. Like, it's fair.
Yeah.
That's me with like probably 10
classic.
cards every spoiler season.
Yeah.
So
I always get got.
Yes. As a true podcaster, journalist, professional, I was listening to your Push the Point podcast that you did with Hamish, which was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about like the generic, like designing generic Majestics, where you were trying to find like a power level where like it wasn't like one of those cards that you look at and be like, I'm thinking about you. Because those are the cards that always just don't make the decks, right? They just don't end up working and making decks, and then they're just kind of like these generics that don't really do anything. Is that kind of like the target for the Fable in a way? Because you don't want something like this Fable to be like busted, super playable. Everyone needs one because of the rarity of the card.
Yeah, I would say so. It's somewhere around there. Okay. It's also interesting with like landmarks and gems, and they do such different things. I think it's hard to. It's a hard question to answer, honestly, because it really depends on the specific case. It's definitely a case by case basis, but it's definitely thinking back about that answer. Maybe the true answer is getting Fabled to the right spot. Honestly, it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah. So we have one last question for you, and thank you again for being so gracious with your time.
Thank you.
As like you guys, like LSS has really like honed in on like start and play, stay and play, and these cards and mechanics that like are very powerful. Like, are there concerns with like the legendary design because they are starting to play, stay and play? That was like preceding that might like overshadow cards like Tunic, Tech Plating, these cards that are just like incredibly powerful. And as like you try to make sure that you don't kind of like push the boundaries too far with them. Like when you're working on those cards, like how do you try to make that, I guess, work without being overshadowed by their predecessors?
I think it's another one of those kind of like finding that fine line, the power and balance thing, and I think it's definitely a tough job for development, is finding the sweet spot of being like, is this too powerful? Is this not powerful enough? And I think over the last few sets, I think we're getting better and better at getting that spot right. And I think it's thanks to the growth we've been able to have over the last 2 years, and I think we're definitely getting better at finding that sweet spot. I think it's interesting because as same legendary, similarly to Majestics, can fill different roles of being like, is this something that wants to, like, does this propel a particular strategy? Is this an answer for a particular matchup? And does this have a flavor significance? So that just like the other cards, it just fulfills different. There's different kind of like pushes and pulls for each one of these, and I think that can kind of, and I think what we're getting better at is kind of like pushing the cards to a point where it is like a strong consideration. And I think I think Bright Light's kind of, I think we did a good job where basically the legendaries kind of are appealing enough to at least some form of a subset of the player base. Mm-hmm. And that is definitely something that's like, we try to be as conscious as possible. And yeah, it is again like an extremely tough job for the team to achieve. But I think we've each set, and with kind of the growth in the team that we've had as well, we've kind of getting better and better at pinpointing things that we can improve on and get better. And I think that's what you can expect a lot more from in 2024, honestly.
I'm excited. Like, as a competitive player, like following like the sets, like I can see like the development kind of like honing in on some things. It's really cool to see. And like I'm really hyped for this year. I'm really hyped for Heavy Hitters. I'm just stoked. Flesh and Blood's a great game.
Yeah,
it's nuts. Yeah. This December, when I was dying of bronchitis and COVID, I went back and played some Legends of Runeterra, and I grinded up the ladder, and then I was like, God, this game sucks. I was like man, I was like, I just want to play Flesh and Blood. It's
hard to try other things, honestly. Yes. Like, yeah, same for me. Even I play Fab all day, every day, and then I try something else, and I'm like, it doesn't scratch the edge in the same way. You know?
It just doesn't hit right.
Yeah, it's just the level. As we talked about it, right? It's the level of interaction, and like both players' turns, right? You're always blocking, attacking, making that choice, and then the I really think the hook for me has been, and like props to you guys for this, is just the level of depth that this game has, right? Yeah. Like at its core, the mechanics get there, but then the card design and everything, like you said, has definitely been leveling up, and we can see it from our side, right? And I'm just excited. I'm excited for 3 draft sets this year. I'm excited that one of your favorite all-time set is coming, and you're gonna come back and talk to us about it.
Yeah,
I'm pumped to hear that. That was a cool answer. I'm excited now.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I'll hit you guys up when it's out, and we can have a chat.
We definitely look forward to it. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to have you on. I don't think there's any greater honor that we could have on this show. So like, thank you so much for your time, especially on holiday in the lovely weather you're having.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm just like, I don't know if it's visible, but I'm just chilling outside This
Yes.
is what New Zealand Christmas time looks like.
Yeah, that is awesome.
But yeah, thank you so much for having me. Again, it's like it's funny going from like listening to you guys for ages to actually being able to have a chat. So, always a pleasure. Hit me up whenever you want.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, Karol.
Thank you.
No worries.